Hello. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. You have to forgive me. I do not speak French, nor do I speak Spanish. And even the English that I speak, I need to translate it from my local dialect, you know. So it's good to have you all here. We're kicking off. We're just giving 2 more minutes to have a few more people come in, and then we'll start and would run. We'll try our best to be on time. But the major thing I'd like to share is that this interaction will not be effective if you do not contribute. So as much as the panelists are going to share their experience, as much as we're going to look at their case studies, they would tell us what has worked for them and share their opinions. It would only make sense to have your inputs. That way it makes the conversation richer. So with that, my name is Collins Ezira Nwosu. I am the trade ambassador to the International Trade Facilitation Association. What ITFA does basically is to help businesses, individuals, governments to provide solutions towards non-tariff barriers to trade. Interestingly, we're beginning to find that certain aspects of policy fall under non-tariff barriers. That might sound strange to the core trade enthusiast. However, as we go along the panel session, you would see why I said so. So basically, this session is inclusive policies for sustainable and resilient livelihoods in the circular economy for women, really. And what we're trying to explore is how empowering the rural communities through women boosts trade, boosts the circular economy, ensures that not only are we meeting our SDGs, we're also taking action that impacts climate-related matters. I'll tell you a short story. I grew up in the plateau in Nigeria. There's a state called Plateau State, and literally it is a plateau. And one of the things that happened in the community that I grew up in, Giring community, is that we had meetings. Often we would meet. You know, I recall my father calling meetings of all family heads to discuss matters around security, discuss matters around common facilities like roads, access to water, you know, and they would take certain decisions at their level and take action at that level. Then go to the local government and say, this is what we have done. This is what we need. We need more support. And very early on, we learned that policies are not always at the federal level. They can start, we have our businesses with our business policies. There are policies that occur at family and community levels. And you hear quite soon how some communities have brought together, have enacted policies that are impacting the environment completely, as well as the livelihoods of rural women. So this is a very important conversation. This is a conversation that is timely. This is one that we cannot afford to ignore. And we hope that in the next couple of minutes, we would all share from the wealth of our experience, enrich this conversation, beyond the conversation, take action. Okay? So the panel, the way we would run today, basically, I would introduce the panelists. Thereafter, we'll just do a brief intro and would have them speak a bit, introduce themselves, tell us a bit about what they do, especially in relation to today's panel session. Then we'll take them through some questions to get deeper insights into what they are doing, into how it affects this topic and the rest of us, and things that we can learn from them. Then we'll take some questions from you, comments from you. They would answer those questions. they would do their best to address, the questions and the comments that are coming to them. Thereafter, if time permits, we would have a mini breakout session where at your tables you would share. Some would expect that those at the tables would bring up one thing that they've taken away from the entire session that we could incorporate in what we're doing overall, so that we can leave here with some actionable steps. And if that's okay, I would like to see hands raised to say that that sounds like a plan. Sounds like a plan. All right, so that sounds like a plan. Thank you. So without further ado, I want to introduce Titi Ojo. Without reading much of a CV, but I'll just share this. Titi is enthusiastic about trade. She's enthusiastic about how we can practically solve problems through the world of trade. She has worked on various projects that are trade related. She currently sits, her profile is in the brochure, so I don't want to bore you with that. But what I can say is here is an embodiment of trade support. Here is an embodiment of women empowerment, and Titi empowers action on all fronts. Please put your hands together as we welcome Titi. I also want to bring to the stage Priscilla Nwosu. She's playing two roles today. She's my wife as well. She's the co-founder of Shea Integrated Global Foundation, and she lives and breathes women empowerment at rural levels. And currently one of the projects she's working on is what made us say, hey, we need to have you on this panel to share your experience and what has happened, especially the challenges and how they surpassed them. Often we come and share the good stories, but there are troubles. Each good story is backed by many, many challenges. We want to know how you surpass those challenges and see if we can incorporate them at a larger scale. So please make welcome with a round of applause, Priscilla Nwosu. We also want to bring to the stage Ms. Olusola Sowemimo of Okpe Farms. She's a woman of many parts, but what I know her for is I want everyone to eat organic. I want the communities to be organic. I want us to ensure we're not killing the environment. Let's make sure everything is organic. So she's probably wearing organic clothes, right? And biodegradable eyeglasses, right? Yes, okay. So, and again, she's embedded in the communities, working, hands on the ground, working in those communities and doing a lot of work through the women folk in those communities. So she's come to be known as, as a supporter, not just as a supporter. Many of the women you would meet in her community will call her mama, and for a good reason. So please put your hands together as we welcome Ms. Olusola Sowemimo. You're all welcome. All right, so again, time is not our friend, but the more we can make the most of it, the better for us. I'm just going to move straight on to Titi. Titi, would please just take the floor for the next 2 minutes. Introduce yourself as you would like to be known and share with us some of the work you're doing around policy and sustainable livelihoods in the circular economy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me very well? It's quite okay. So I've been introduced, but he said I should introduce myself the way I want to be known. All right. I know that most of the introduction is in the program, which is probably on your table. But let's see how I can do justice to this. I've worked in the area of policy, especially trade policy, for the last 6 years, which I find very interesting, actually. And I've done a couple of things with women. I've worked with both genders for years. But when I started working with women, I found something special. There was just something special about working with women. And I've worked with women that, of course, I'm from Nigeria. I've worked with women that are interested in participating in trade, especially export. And most of them are trying to see and try so much hard to ensure that their products can be exportable. And of course, as also a business development specialist, I work with them on the business level as well, looking at their business models, supporting them to see how they can improve. Issues of quality has come in. On the policy level, I did quite a bit of work in that space. How do we represent the needs of women? How do we engage public sector? How do we engage government to see the problems, the issues these women are facing? And how do we begin to reform policy that is reflective of those needs? And it's important that policy is evidence-based policy. So what we've tried to do as much as possible, and what I had done working with the UK Department for International Development as a consultant, was to ensure that we commission studies, and those studies help us to know what exactly is happening at every point in time. From there, we pick recommendations, we look at the challenges, and that's what we present to the policymakers. So it's evidence-based, it's not just emotional, it's what is going on right now. So this is it, and this is how it's affecting the women. This is how it's affecting the exporting community. So policy has been an area I love so much, because even with that effort, I've seen 1 or 2 policies actually formulated in favor of our exporters. So it's a great place to be. And today, I'm hoping that I'll be able to contribute tremendously to the conversation. Sustainability is very important, because in the definition of sustainability is about meeting the needs of today in such a way that the needs of tomorrow can still be met. We're not jeopardizing the future, and that's important. We don't want the next generation to show up and there's really nothing for them to do, because we've destroyed everything they need to work with. So sustainability is a powerful topic at this time. Our national lives, wherever we're from, sustainability is a big issue. And I'm happy to be here today to be part of that conversation. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Titi. We'll probably make you a senator. Have to hold elections and put you on that seat after now. Priscilla, please, if you would like to share with us, especially from the perspective of what you're doing currently, your projects.
Good afternoon. My name is Priscilla Nwosu, and I'm the co-founder of Shea Integrated Global Foundation. I love working with women, and it was because of that passion that I found the village, and I practically took over the village just to work with the women based on what they have in that community, which is Shea, not just to be able for them to have financial empowerment, but for the women to know that what they have in their community can help them come out of multi-dimensional poverty, as it were, known, in rural areas. And so for that, I think that the conversation that not just to talk, but it's time to take action. I'd already been taking the action, working with these women. And so when we talk about policy, I can proudly say that when you say policy, implementation now is the key thing. Now, in the village where we work, sometimes you find shea trees are fallen for firewood, and it depletes the trees. And when it depletes these trees, these women will not have what they normally would use to process shea into butters, take it to the market, and be able to take care of themselves, their children, and their family. And so when we had this problem, we thought to talk to the gatekeepers, which in those rural areas, because it's in northern Nigeria, we call them emirs. And so in speaking to the emirs, thankfully, he was very receptive, very open, and was willing to see that his community, the women, and even the youth there are able to get success from this production, because that shea butter and shea butter processing is a very huge market. And so he made a law, and the law comes with a fine of 50,000 Nigerian naira if these trees are cut down. So right now, for him to bring up that policy, implementation is immediate. And thankfully, the number of trees that were there when we started has increased. So it has not decreased because of tree felling. And so I feel that being in this panel to have this conversation is truly an honor. And I hope that we'll have a very good afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Priscilla. I'm hearing a few things already from Titi and from yourselves, things like evidence-based policies, implementation versus just policy provision, but we'll get to that. So Mrs. Sowemimo, the floor is yours.
I started out as a lawyer, and I am still a lawyer actually, but I found my passion in organic farming. My mom had died of cancer at the age of 72. And that got me it got me worked up. So I had traveled out just to find some space. And while I was there, I got an invite for a cancer conference. And I thought, a whole conference dedicated to cancer, I have to attend. I remember telling my sister-in-law then, and she said, but you didn't plan for this. I said, well, I'm not going to miss it for anything. And while I was there, I then realized the importance of food, and particularly food that is devoid of chemicals, synthetics. And I told myself, we were over 1,000 participants, and 90% of them were cancer survivors. That was huge for me, you know, because in my country, Nigeria, people die of cancer like every day. So from that conference, when I got to know that food was a major thing, and organic food for that matter, I got home and I said I was going to start an organic farm. Everybody thought it was impossible. And I was able to find land in a community where they were so receptive. I mean, they took me on like one of theirs. You would think I came from that community. So one of the first things I told them was that I needed to give back to them, because the rate at which they're applying chemicals and synthetics, those in the urban areas believe that the food that comes from the village are supposed to be better, you know? And I said, we're deceiving them because what we're doing is not the proper thing. So the first thing I got us to do was to actually run, I then met with the university, an Agric university in the same state, Ogun State, and we held a program for them where we were able to demonstrate to them the impact of the chemicals they were using in the food they were producing. And I think that was what endeared me to them. So since then, we have done quite a few things together, and I'll be happy to share more with you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Okay, straight into it. And this is for any one of you to answer. You know, would like to hear from your experience, from the work that you're doing currently. You know, how crucial has policy been in shaping the results that you have? You know, how crucial has, you know, the existing policies been in the impact on the work you do with women and the sustainability of that? So remember, we're talking about the circular economy, and we can't do this without certain rules being in place. So if you would care to share, any one of you would love to hear that.
In the community where I work with women, because the emir had put up that policy and implemented it, that trees, shea trees in particular, are not to be felled. So I thought, now, normally villagers, if there's no stopgap, they're going to go back to tree felling. So in partnership with Jeff SGP and UNDP, we were able to, and the foundation were able to get them an alternative power for cooking, which is the LPG gas. And in doing that as well, we've trained over 200 women, and all of these 200 women were given those LPG gas. Now that's 200 households, knowing that there will be no tree to be felled at any time. And so we have the tree continue to bud and continue to service the community, and thereby putting in place sustainability even for the next, couple of years to come. And as we go on, we see if there's any hiccup anywhere, we try to see how best to be able to cover that so that the environment is healthy, not just the environment, but the community where these trees are, I think. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. A bit of twist on that, because what you shared with us is policy at the rural level. So this is the community heads, the emir now saying, we have put this law in place, and because it affects the women and it affects their livelihood. Okay. So would like to know if any of you have had similar experiences and how you think that policies being enacted at any level creates inclusiveness and sustainability in their livelihoods.
Okay, we're talking about inclusion here, and we're looking at inclusion as a value chain, really, because if it's like the women, they are the primary level of that whole chain of production. So it starts with them. So let's look at the Shea women, for example. I've also done some work in Shea some years back, and I realized that while we're taking them on quality, the issues of quality, those that want to buy the Shea in the city, they want quality Shea. But the Shea trees are not in the city. The Shea trees are with the rural women. So it was important to empower the rural women to process, pick their nuts and process, and at least to a certain extent, very good quality nuts and good quality butter gets transmitted to the city. Okay. So at that point, we had those that were like, okay, you know what, after this project, I want to be buying from the women. Now look at it. Quality assured from that level, from that primary level, it affects every other part of that chain, whether we like it or not. So if you look at even quality, if you look at policy beyond the rural community, and we say, okay, we're going to put a policy in place that shea butter has to be of a particular standard, grade, a particular grade, it will still drive down to where it's being produced, regardless. So it will become like a demand-driven thing, more like a push-pull, but in this case, it's a pull, and there's a push as well. So it's like a push from the women, the rural community, a pull from the guys in the city, because there's a policy that says that every butter that you have to sell in the capital, for example, must be of this particular quality. Even if you're going to process further, you want to ensure that whatever you buy from the rural community is of a certain level of quality. So when we talk about policy, really, first of all, it should be inclusive because everybody in the value chain has a role to play. It doesn't just stay with the elites. No, it percolates down to the rural woman that produces it. And we can actually ensure that quality is assured, even for the guys in the urban centers can actually ensure that quality is assured, truly, because they know where it's coming from. They know the source. So they also want to ensure that from that source, quality is assured. So really, policy that is inclusive is demand-driven. And if at any level where we want to institute that, it will still get back to the rural community, where the primary production even starts from. And indeed, we need to start thinking about it that way. Not anyone in isolation. Everybody should be inclusive. So if we say this is it at this level, we know that it's going to get down to this woman. And the woman knows if I don't do it well, nobody will buy it at that end. So it becomes an end-to-end kind of thing. And that's what inclusiveness is all about. Everybody in the value chain now would have to conform to the quality issues because the policy has been enacted that says quality has to be assured throughout the value chain. So that's what I have to say for now.
Excellent. I think before you lend some light to this, I mean, what I'm hearing is that we need to recognize whatever is done at any level impacts the other. It's not in isolation. So if those who want a certain level of quality say, we want this level of quality, however, you need to assure me that you're not harming the environment. So there's evidence to show that you're not doing so. I'm happy to pay a premium perhaps for that. Everyone in the cycle has something to show for it. But before you add to this, I would like to know what challenges do the women face, because it's not easy to meet standards. I mean, if you want to get certification, it has to be third-party certification. It comes at a cost. It's not always easy to do that. So what challenges do these women face in accessing resources that they require, to fit into, the rules or the laws or the policies or the structures that we're trying to put in place for them? I would like to hear from what you're doing. Ms. Sowemimo, please.
Well, in the community where I am, surprisingly, I discovered that we have over 2,000 communities. I was stunned. I didn't know were that many. Apparently, some of them are completely cut off. So they don't even get to come to the, what you would call the periphery of where things are happening. But we have had a huge success with a particular woman who in 2006 found herself in one of those communities and decided that she wanted to do more for the women. Coming up in a setting where women were supposed to be in the kitchen, she had to fight a huge war. Luckily enough, they have a kind of judiciary, even though it's local to them, it's actually recognized by the state government. So this woman was able to fight for the other women to actually be able to do something for themselves, because they were just meant to be at home. That was, as far as the men were concerned, that was what they were there for. So that is one breakthrough that I can say that we have heard. And today she's like the woman leader of all the, I think she, in her team are about 5,000 women. She controls about 5,000 people. Yes. In fact, when I was coming here, I had a discussion with her. I said, if I had to sit in front of people and tell them how it's been with you, she said, I don't want money. Just come and share knowledge with us. We want the women to advance, no more, do more. So that's the level that we are at. We have not advanced to the emir, but we have done a fair bit, because that level of judiciary has given her recognition and they respect anything that comes from her. So working with her has been helpful because she's not as educated as I am. So I'm able to push some things her way, and we're beginning to get quite a bit more results from the women folk.
Okay, excellent. I see Titi is, is itching to say something, but before you do, I want to crown everything you said with the last comment, or the last bit of comments, no more, do more. So for this to work, we're getting into a guided knowledge, a facilitated knowledge economy. So it's not just money, but that the knowledge and that you give them, and facilitating how that knowledge is utilized is what I sense is impacting what you're doing. Okay, Titi.
Okay, so as we're talking about quality, my mind just went straight to a project I did last year. It's about 6 months, and I was working in the agricultural value chain, and I was also the standards expert for that project. And I saw how the issues of quality played out in rural communities. Especially communities, okay, the value chain I was overseeing then that's for chili pepper, tomatoes, and ginger. And of course, it's part of northern Nigeria, some part of Southwest. Now, part of the issues of quality is some of the women do dry their things in the open. And of course, when it comes to contamination, it was quite high. So that project introduced what we call solar dryers. And that's a tunnel type of solar that looks really big, and it's that long to the end of this room. And we introduced that. And of course, it was something new to the women, but painstakingly, of course, we told them, you know what, take these things off the road where you put them. Once it's the season, you put it in the dryers, and then we had to teach them a new culture. It was a new culture, really, because they're used to putting their things out in the sun. But here this is a temperate environment. This is something you can control. It's a controlled environment. You know that, okay, within 3 days, my chili pepper will be dry. And from them, I move that out. There are trays in that old structure. So they put in the trays. And, I was back there to talk to them about the business model as well, because I felt it goes beyond just drying your pepper. This is business. It's also business. So as cooperatives, you can begin to start charging some of your members a particular amount, because these installations here, they are millions of naira. In fact, they didn't know how much it costed. I asked the project I was working with, I said, did you ever tell these women how much this investment was? They said, no. I said, no, you have to tell them. They felt I said, no, you have to tell them, because they need to know the value of that investment so that they can appreciate it. And I went to a community, and when we're talking, I told them this thing sitting down there is about 25 million. Their mouth were like, no way. I said, yes, you heard that right. And I told them, if you were to pay this back to this organization that gave this to you, how long will it take you? They said they can never pay back because it will take a lifetime. I said, okay, so let's talk about it. Now I have your ears. So think about it like a business that over the next 10 years, for example, you want to make back this money. And of course, we're saying deal with your cooperatives with ease, of course, not that you now start telling them. But the fact is, you need to maintain the solar dryer. You need to have some money in your purse. And these are the things we're talking about. And then we said, extend it to other communities. So now there's a service. This is a service. In fact, I told them this solar dryer in my hands, in Titi or Joe's hands, will not be, this is not what I'll see if it was mine. I know how the kind of business I'll be doing with this thing by now. So I said, yeah, let's fix a price. Let's do this if anybody comes, but you know what, do this for 1 month. Different products will come into this dryer, note it, know how long it takes. So if someone comes, you know, okay, this is how much you're going to pay. 5 days, come and pick your stuff. If the person comes in, he doesn't come on time, build the storage, put it right there, free the space so that other people can bring in produce. And I started seeing them doing this truly. And I told them too, I said, see, we're talking about also being able to export your product. We want clean products. I can even be someone that will talk about this product everywhere I go. If I want to start exporting dried ginger or dried chili pepper, I can always buy from you now that I know that this is done in an hygienic situation. Now, I saw how they caught up with it truly. And in fact, if you see the ledger, what they call that, I went again one time, I saw, they told me this is how much we earned last week from people coming to dry. I said, yeah, you guys are getting it. You're getting it now. Now we moved them from drying their produce in an open area, okay, to in a controlled environment where it's clean, all the elements that have affected this process are totally gone. So I gave them a challenge as well. I said, you know what? Over the next year, for example, we can bring in NAFDAC. We have certifying agencies that need to certify what you're doing, ISOs. We can begin to look at certification so that anything that comes out of here has a seal of a particular standard. And we can talk about your produce everywhere we go, that is being produced, is being dried in a clean environment. And then anybody can buy this from you because we can say it is what you do. Yeah, the issue of sustainability, yes, will be another conversation because I want to go back maybe in another year and still see that they're doing this well. I know the issue of batteries get stolen as solar panels, and it becomes such a big deal to replace them. That could come up. But of course, the business model is to let them know that you will need money. Someday you need to replace the panels. One day you need to replace the batteries. That's why you need to run this as a business. And they've understood it. And they fix the prices themselves. So I didn't come and say, do it this way, because I'll be thinking about it in my city, with my city brain. So I told them to go do it themselves. And they arrived at something that was quite affordable for everyone. And before we knew it, other produce started coming. People brought onions, some people brought okra, which was not even any of the value chains we were working with, but they were still making money. So the issue of the cost of quality sometimes may first start with a behavioral change, attitudinal change. If we have organizations like development partners that will take the pain to let them also see why quality is important, and also now build a business model around it, it helps them become sustainable, really. Because by the time they begin to see the impact, they will continue on that line. And that's all I'll say for now.
Thank you, Titi. Thank you very much. I mean, you beat us to it because I was going to start taking you all up on, the circular economy. How does it contribute to a more sustainable, a greener future, right? So moving their drying from the roadside to using solar energy is one of those green techs that will, that probably would impact the trade practices, and we're already seeing that from what you're doing. So you've given us the case study, you've answered some questions we haven't asked. But at this time, I want to ask a question that I would love for everyone in the audience to think about, because your responses would be as important as theirs. And this would be, what role can international collaboration and trade agreements play in creating favorable conditions for rural women's participation in circular economy activities. Like what she shared with us, they couldn't afford on their own. It would take them a while to afford the kind of equipment, to pay for that kind of equipment. So their collaboration has brought this. So I'm asking everyone to think about it, and maybe that would form part of our breakout of the next session, because we're coming to you to want to hear from you as well. So Priscilla, do you have similar experiences with the women in terms of, tech, in terms of supporting them with the rural level, and it's now impacting, them on the trade side of things?
The women I work with normally to process shea, they use the traditional way of processing shea. But we try to make it more accessible for them to use the modernized tools, because it will speed up production compared to when we use the traditional method. And so we gave them a couple of equipment, semi-automated equipment to use to speed up this processing. Now, because of that processing, it is not just for them to be able to process. The women need to be educated on how to use not just the equipment, but be educated in, like Ms. Titi was talking about, quality. And when it comes to the shea value chain, quality is at the very top. And so because I had that at the back of my mind, that the quality of the shea butter coming out of that village need to be top notch, these women were, all 200 of them were trained under organic EcoCert protocols to understand from harvest time, from the time of picking, all the way to the time of processing these butters. And it is from that education that they are able to have these new skills. Before these women get into the wild and they pick the nuts, even with the ones that are already germinating. So now they know not to pick the ones that are germinating. They know, okay, we're supposed to, excuse me, we're supposed to leave about 40% back on the soil so that the tree continues to grow, and thereby having a sustainable environment as well in that community. And so I think that with what we're doing, that these women are able to see far. And that is why when it comes to what the question you're asking before going to the breakout is that we now think for them to have that access to market is to offtake what they process. And so it makes it easier for them to be focused, to follow the right protocol in processing and meeting the quality of the product.
Okay, so you have seen the future, and you have answered a question I was going to ask next, majorly about creating access to markets and creating access to finance. How do we do this? But in all I can hear so far, you all have talked about culture shifts. So there needs to be a mind shift. You've all talked about charity, in a sense, talked about charity versus trade. So let's look at this as a business and not just charity. We're not here to give you aid, but we want you to actually run your businesses. And sustainability for the future. Okay, I just want to do this exercise with everyone. Something to help us think about how culture is created, right? So if I say one, can we all do this, right? So one. Okay, beautiful. Two, can we do this? Okay, beautiful. And three, I want us to have our hands on our chin, right? Okay, so it will be 1, 2, and then 3, hand on chin, right? Okay, so we'll do it one more time. 1, 2, 3, hand on chin. Keep it that way. Look around. Is that your chin? All right, this is your chin, right? That's your chin. But it didn't matter what I said. It was the action that I took that drove yours, right? So if we continue to give aid, if we continue to think of them as rural people and not part of an ecosystem, we'll treat them that way and the responses we get will be different. So for culture shifts, even those interacting with them, we need to shift. Okay, I think we'll break at this point and let's take some comments, questions from the audience.
Yes, thank you very much. Can you all hear me? Yes, great. My name's Frankie. I'm from Spire Seed in Norway. First of all, it's amazing to hear a panel of Black women, Black African women speaking from their own experience. That's really great, and that's the thing that we need more of everywhere, and especially in politics. And I just wanted to ask, because research shows that women, especially in developing countries, structurally benefit less than proportionately from trade liberalization, and also bear much higher share of adverse impacts due to unequal access of resources and power. Here at the WTO, we often hear that more liberalization is proposed as the ultimate solution. How do you view this? Thank you.
So if I get it, Frankie, you want to get their views on trade liberalization and its impact on women. So if you have any specific case studies, I think that you want to share, let's go ahead. Who wants to respond to that?
Okay, let me try. So this conversation has been on for a while, not today, like it's been on forever. And it's women seems to always be at the end of this receiving, the stick. But quite a number of things are being done. Now I'm going to use a Nigerian example, and I know that culture plays a major role in this area, especially in a system where it's largely patriarchal. It's the man that owns the land, it's the men that do the work, and the woman stays at home and is waiting for the man to show up with the meat. So it's been like that for a very long time. But the narrative is beginning to change. I am seeing a shift in this, and a very drastic shift for that matter. In the areas where I work, and I told you I work with women, I'm seeing women also rising up to say, you know what, we also have to be providers. In fact, the economy of the world has changed. Things are changing. That even men are now looking up to the women now to say, you got to do something too. So I think even if we didn't think this was necessary, even the world is changing in a way that women now have a role to play, even in providing for homes, providing for children, providing for their we are seeing women now being uncomfortable, just sitting and not doing anything. We see women that want to become who they really want to be, and they're looking for that power to do that. And they're saying, my husband, this is who I want to be. Allow me to be. And we're seeing considerate men in some cases to saying, my woman is in herself, she should be whole, HOWLE. So I will allow her to be what she wants to be. We've also seen women in the area of trade, how we do well with whatever we do. We are economic, what do we call that now? We trade, we sell. Women are always in that space. So when we bring women into the trade space, we see the impact it has. Was it last year or 2 years ago? I trained about 120 women, and we're looking at export readiness. We see the fantastic things they're doing. Honestly, it was just amazing. So most of them, maybe about 20%, they were able to upscale their products. They were able to sell in some new markets. And I could see how happy they were. Even their spouses were happy because they can now see their women doing very well. So I think the narrative is changing. I think the world economy is also forcing women or forcing men to accept that women have to work. I'm seeing things changing truly. But yes, culture is still a big deal because of culture. Women, you should be the silent one. You should be the one that sits at home. But trust me, these things are changing. And I'm looking forward to a time when we really take the stage. Yeah, there's the issue of equality. We're not saying we are men now. No. But we have our own contributions. And our contributions are beginning to count. I'm seeing that happening, truly. All right. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Titi. I think basically, if I get it right, what you're saying is that trade is emanating at the point of need. So need is driving trade, and as a result, everyone is getting involved. Every family member is getting involved, and more women are getting involved in what comes to the table. As a result, business is being done, and whether it is globally or at the rural level, we're having more involvement. So it may take a while, but it's already underway, and we'll see more of that on the continent. So thank you, Frankie, for that question. Yes, please.
Yes, hello. My name is Joy, and I'm the founder of Africa Women in Trade. As you can hear, the word is a lot intense because we all deal with women, over 4,000 in trade. But my question here is about the circular economy, the one that in the discussion at the moment. As you know, the women on the ground, they have been actually existing for a long time with the circular economy without really going into the formal way. So how are you documenting this? Because circular economy within the small groups of women is quite amazing. When I talk about that, I talk about the technologies, even advancing themselves to technology, but even before technology came in, or even existing in some of the countries, they're still doing a great amount in the circular economy. But how are you tracking this? Because it's something that I think most of the government is untrackable, but it's doing the work that it's supposed to do on the ground. But how can we bring, especially the rural women?
Joy, that's a very key question. So the question, ladies, is how are you tracking this? So how are you keeping the records? I know you just mentioned the percentage of the results you got from a project. So we'd like to hear if both of you please share.
I would like to share a particular case study that I got to know about, and it's a very interesting one. It's in Niger State in Nigeria. So they decided that each child would have a meal in school. And this was to help the mothers, because most times these women are not as active because they also have to provide food, go home, make food for the children, and then that disturbs the length of time that they actually spend at the market to sell their wares. So they devised a method whereby the mothers were trained on cooking skills up to a certain standard. And from there on, food safety and all of that, it's a huge project in Niger State. And the mothers were trained. So guess what? The mothers were now the ones cooking the food for the schools. And they went further to actually ensure that the very rural women were the ones growing the food. It's a project that when I heard about it, it gave me a personal concern that if people are tracking this and are able to measure it, then I probably have work to do in my own community. So when others are getting it right, they send the feelers to those of us who are among such women to try and do a lot more for them. So that's the case study that I have found out, which I'm happy to share. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Priscilla wants to put a word in on this.
Yeah, some of the tracking, like for me, we've spoken to the state government about what we're doing in these villages with these women. The same thing also with the local government areas. We're also speaking to private organizations on what we're doing. In one of the cases, we bought a tricycle to the village, because the Shea is in the wild. To get up, and the village where I work is in Nasarawa State, so to get up to where the trees are in abundance, you have to climb, and there are a lot of bushes, so you climb up. But with the tricycle, it makes it easier. Now, when I got to the village, none of the women, over 200 women, nobody could drive. They couldn't drive anything. They couldn't. So what I did with one of the youths was to teach one of the women how to drive the tricycle. So currently in that village, she'll be the first woman to drive a tricycle. which the men were even amazed that she's going to learn how to drive that. Now that is being documented so that it can be replicated even in other villages, and it can spiral down to other states as well. So I feel that those tracking, it's like for my foundation, I feel that with proper documentation and having all the people who are supposed to be in the know of what is going on in these villages, we could have all of those tracking, in one place, which one can easily go back to as time goes on. Thank you.
Titi, go ahead.
Okay, so quickly, you talked about tracking. We should just make it a standard that we track. We have KPIs, even in development. We want to know gender composition, how many women. That has become a standard, isn't it? So when we come to circular economy as well, where we talk about reduction of waste, reuse, regeneration, can we also have those indicators in what we track? That helps. And if it becomes a standard, every project that works in the rural community has it as a key performance indicator, then we'll just realize everybody is tracking it. Because this is really what's going on. Circular economy is a big, we won't say it's a buzzword as it were, but it's what the world is focusing on that as much as possible. So and we're talking about policy anyway. And under policies, we talk about standards. So can we standardize some of these things? What we measure on our project? Can this now come in terms of reuse, regeneration, waste, waste management? Let it just become a standard. And you realize that by the time all the projects are comparing notes, we've all captured this one thing. And that's what I just wanted to add.
Okay, so track and report. Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm Mattia Antonini from Italy. I'm a master's student, and I just have like two questions. One regarding the barriers to inclusivity, and what are the common barriers of obstacles that hinder the participation of rural women in circular economy initiatives? And are there innovative approaches to overcoming these barriers? And one last question, how can policies and institutions support the long-term resilience regarding enabling environment for empowerment? Thank you.
Okay, so barriers to participation, policies that would create inclusion, and how can we, when I say we now, we're talking about individuals, governments play a role. So basically that sums up your questions. Is that correct? All right. Ladies, floor is yours.
I'd like to mention one or two things about the barriers, and this is from the communities around me. First of all, we realize that for most rural women, their lives are more like divided into three. So let's say 50% is production, having babies. That's all they're seen to do. Then you find culture playing a very big role. Most of them do not own land. They don't really have anything that is credit worthy that they can bring out as, okay, maybe a collateral, or if they wanted some money. And that is always a very big deal for them. We find out that even when the banks come, they still want to use the criteria that they would use for the urban, for the rural. Now, most rural women who even have their money do not bank it. So they do not have that digital that financial tracking. They make them, the very nearest community to me, they make what we call gari. It's from cassava. And that's what they sell. That's what they make and sell every 5 days. So what happens is that they go to the market, sell it by cash, and they're happy to have their cash. So that is one huge barrier for them. No track record, no credit points. So they're usually at a big disadvantage. But what is now happening is with this lady that I'm working with, one of the things they're doing is that they're beginning to contribute. You know, there is a system that we call Ajo. It's it's like a local banker. So you deposit some money like maybe every week and things like that. So now what they do is that when that money is substantial enough to do something, then they get to do something. So those are the ways in which those barriers are being scaled where I operate. Others may have something to contribute. Thank you.
Okay, excuse me. For me, the barrier is like when the women process Shea is where to take it to, because even when they take it to the market, half of the time they come back with it and maybe they sell just a very small quantity. So to overcome that barrier, what we do is we offtake what they process. That's the entire production. Now, we also encourage other businesses who are buying Shea to also come in and buy off what the women process. And then for policies and long-term resilience, I feel that educating the women and teaching them those new skills is something that over time, they can on their own even find out that there's something they can do that can make their community even more sustainable beside what they have currently. Because Shea is for a season, like by, as at this time, Shea is out of season right now. So what is the next thing they will be doing while they wait for next year, sometime in July for the next harvest? So we're already looking at that, where there's other cash crops that they can be doing to help them to be able to sustain them for that period up until the next season.
Thank you, Priscilla. Okay, go
So
on.
one quick one. When it comes to policy discourse, I noticed that, well, I'm from Nigeria, I keep using that's my example. I realized that when you look at the table where the policy discourse is holding, you probably not see any rural woman there. That's the truth. So they're excluded completely. And so that in itself has affected them already, because their own perspective is not even included in the policy. So at the end of the day, you see policies made for SMEs, but the rural woman still doesn't find a place in there because nothing is designed to suit the kind of thing she does. I noticed that it's easy for governments of today to just think for rural people. We just think for them. Whereas there's something that they've been doing. In fact, if you ask me, there's local technology they've practiced for many years and it has worked for them. But you see urban people just show up in rural communities to change everything and condemn it and say, this is a new thing. And the woman is just wondering, what are you talking about? So that inclusivity is missing most times. And we need to start bringing these people to the table where policy is being discussed, especially policies that would affect them. Earlier, I talked about it, that this whole thing is a value chain. So nobody should be left out when it comes to talking about the issues. They should also be there. They should tell us what they think, what they feel. And you'll be surprised that their inputs will shock everyone. Like, really, that was a missing piece we never even saw. So that's critical. I think governments of the day should give rural communities the place that they need to have on the table when policy is being discussed. It's a call, really. We need to get that right.
Let me just add that another thing is that we need to be more, create more gender mainstream activities so that these women can be carried along. It's always easier for the man to come out, but it's always, the women themselves are always reluctant to even bring themselves out. So if we have that gender thing, it would help all of us.
So Matthew, if I'm to attempt, we'll come to you. If I attempt to summarize, basically one is awareness. So the more awareness that is created on all fronts, it helps. Secondly is that we don't have to throw away the old. We can actually improve the old. The old is not necessarily obsolete. It may just need to be upgraded. I think the wheel has remained the wheel for many thousands of years. It's just that now from wood and concrete, it's now stone, it's now rubber, and probably will be different in a couple of years. And so I also hear them say, let's move from information, just information, to understanding, and understanding to knowledge and action. And this will come from continuous discourse. If we don't engage, then that would not take us far. So we need to continually engage and reinforce learning. All right. Yes, please.
Hello. Okay, great. So I just wanted to ask, what are the issues that these women face in reaching the market and making the sale? And how do they approach it? And what happens if there's loss due to, not being able to make the sale? And how do they cope with it? Because loss at that level is, it can be demotivating. Secondly, I also want to ask that you mentioned about a woman leader who inspired a community. So these women, I assume, also face a lot of economic challenges at the level. So what motivated them, and what motivated those 2,000 women to step beyond their economic challenges and do this? And if you can mention, or you can tell about some communities who used indigenous knowledge to develop sustainable livelihood options in the communities. That's all my question. And sorry, my name is Grusha. I'm a graduate student and I'm from India. Thank you.
So thank you, Krusha. If I attempt to summarize your questions, so it's easy to take on, is basically what are the issues or challenges around market access? And how do they deal with loss in case they encounter loss? So if there are any insurances against loss. Next is also the motivation. So you want to have an example around what is motivating them to provide these solutions for themselves, right?
Yeah.
Okay, ladies.
Okay. For the women, loss is always a very big deal. And I would tell you the truth, for now, we are not curbing it 100%. This is because the ones in my own area go to the market every 5 days. It's not a daily market. So many times they produce the cassava enough to go and sell at the market. Before I got into the scheme of things with them, I felt that the quality of the, let me use the word Gary, you can understand, that's a local name. I immediately felt they needed to do more. So I went through their process. I just sat through their process and realized that they were not washing the peeled cassava enough. And if you don't wash it enough, then it's likely to have a bit of sand in it. So that loss to them was because the educated people come to that market and discovered that the quality was not good enough. So one of the things they did was to solicit for some kind, sometimes they do get interventions once in a while. So there was a particular one they got, and they all decided that rather than share the money to go and do their individual businesses, they will put up a borehole. As simple as that sounded, it suddenly changed the level of the quality of the Gary they were producing. And now they actually have like a whole hub in the market where they all sell. Because it's a dried product, if they don't finish selling it, they take it back. So the loss is not, it's not like it used to be when it had to do with quality. And what we've been doing is also to drive markets their way. So we tell people in the semi-urban areas around them to please shop with them. Then you asked about the motivation for the lady who I said is the leader. Now, this woman said in 2006, she herself got some kind of help that made her realize that if as one person, she benefited this and it changed her life this much, then she can imagine if she's able to do this for many more women. So one of the things that she has done is she goes to the they know her in the government offices. She would always go there to go and campaign and canvass for the women. They hold their meetings. She has 2 cooperatives that are very active. You are either in one or the other. and they are very active. They're known to the government. So with that, things are happening. It's just that it's a bit slow. Maybe one will want something bigger, like when my sister here spoke about the dehydrator. This has always been my own personal dream for this community, because some of the things they return home, if they could dry them, for heaven's sake, then they won't be a loss. If you harvest vegetables and you don't finish selling it, it becomes compost. Then you spoke about the indigenous knowledge. Because I practice organic farming among them, I have been able to educate them, to let them know that almost everything they think is waste is actually compost, and it could go back into their soil. So we've taken them through some level of knowledge to know that many of the things they throw away before, they do not need to throw them away. So they be gradually, some of them are building their soil back to get soil that would give them nutrient-rich produce. So that is one area that I can definitely say that the indigenous, in fact, when I first got there, I sat down with them and allowed them to educate me in what they do. And it was fascinating that most of the things they already do were actually part of the organic practices. So the only thing was that I needed to encourage them to do more of it and leave out the fertilizer. And by the time I got there, some of them could not use their land anymore because the land, the soil was ravaged. So knowing that all the waste that they would normally just throw away as rubbish, they just needed to put it back in the soil, and the soil is richer for it. So that has been my own experience.
Okay.
Thank you.
Time is telling us that we need to do something else. I want you to hold your thoughts. Please share.
Can you hear me from the microphone? Yes. Okay. So my name is Olusola Ajayi. I'm a digital transformation consultant. I'm not a farmer, but of course I'm interested in women issues. You've talked extensively about different policies that have been enacted at the rural level. And the big elephant in the room when it concerns Nigeria is security. In your experience, do you know of any policies that are in place to help or support these women? Because we're talking about inclusive policies and sustainability and livelihood and empowering women. Are there any policies that are helping women to ensure that, you know, there's continuity in what they do in terms of ensuring that they can farm securely, safely, without threat to their livelihood and in a sustainable way? Because it's actually an issue in Nigeria.
Let me say that I will be more a target in the rural community than the women themselves. They are relatively safe because they're seen as part of us. So when you talk in terms of security, it will be someone like me, all dressed up, driving down in a Hilux. That would be a target. But personally, I farm in a very safe community. Touch wood. We haven't had any situation that would erupt because the men are always on the move. They have their groups, vigilante groups, and we pay a little stipend just to secure ourselves. So that is my community. It could be different elsewhere.
Let me also say that security is local. So I think one of the things we're not getting so right, for me, my view is we feel security has been provided by the federal government. The president is sitting in the capital, and the insecurity is in your village that is about 15 hours away from the president. So security is local, that's it. And I think our communities need to take it that way, to say we have a role to protect ourselves. The days, well, I grew up in a place where we had vigilantes, and every night they came out and they would be beating a gong and all that. We knew they were there, and we barely had anybody doing anything or shooting someone, really. And suddenly everything just went upside down. And we're going back to that point where we started from now, to say security is local. And that's why we are now beginning to have local vigilante groups now saying we have to take back our security. So the call really, it's on us as local communities to ensure that we guard our communities. Really, we must get people that can come out. And so many things are coming up too. In terms of security, they're saying, are we using, what kind of weapons? Now people are bringing in their local intelligence to fight. And it's all welcome. So that's where I'm going to end this.
So I think you can wrap up just a minute, just 1 minute to wrap up. So the time is.
Thank you very much for these very intelligent discussions. I was just thinking, going back to the title of that, what role do you think intersectoral actions would play? Because we are talking about sustainable livelihoods. Amongst the women you work with, what role will intersectoral action play? Will it move them more forward or whatever? Thank you.
Okay, so if you permit me to take that, okay, Priscilla, if you wrap up, then I'll just give us your words. So it'll be that we've heard from all of you. Then I will take that and use it to wrap up, if you don't mind. Yeah, go ahead, Priscilla.
So when it comes to policies of empowering rural women for sustainable livelihoods, which is something that my foundation is already doing, it is not just to follow policies, but it is that we take action for these policies to be implemented, because we're talking of livelihoods of women with children in areas that sometimes government do not even get to. So if we at private sector are able to get in there and do what we can so that they are able to have a sustainable environment, a sustainable community, then it is for us to make sure that those action does not just stop at words, but at what will make them to continue to have a livelihood that will sustain the communities in generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Priscilla. I think we can wrap up with your question, really, because what you're asking is why we're here. This is not a one-man show. It's not for Priscilla or Sowemimo to do. Neither is it for the government alone to do. But everybody along the value chain needs to say, I will play my part. I recognize that what you do affects the next person. It's a domino effect. So we cannot, at this point, say intersectoral activities will not have impact. Indeed, it will have. Perhaps what we'll need to do, as Mary mentioned, I hope I'm getting her name right. Was it Joy? Right? Joy, sorry. Joy mentioned is we need to measure. And as we begin to measure the impact of these intersections, then we'll begin to see more of its effect. So if it's in tech, how is tech supporting this? If it is in logistics, how is the logistics supporting what you're doing? If so tech can affect everything, logistics can affect everything, policies will affect everything. So the circularity of what we're speaking about goes beyond just waste and reuse of waste and all. It actually goes into the entire ecosystem, recognizing people as they are. With that, we come to a close. Really, I think we would have loved to have these conversations continue. I know I asked a question and said that we'll tackle that question. What I would love for us to do is we have at the back, we have our LinkedIn page. You can scan that, connect with us, and give us your answers to those questions, because we'd love to have those responses as part of our report, our take home. And we want to keep you abreast of what we continue to do, so that the conversations, they're taking action. We want you to continue to take action. We want everyone to take action and see how whatever you're doing from your side of the pond is something perhaps we can modify, and localize and make the best out of. So with this, we'll call it this. We've come to a close. If you don't mind, would love to take a photograph at this end. Just take a group shot. Just recognize those who are here, and say thank you all for coming. Let the conversations continue.